Hello. You might remember from yesterday, or you might not, that I was a bit confused by this passage from Lord Hales in which he tells Boswell that Dr. Johnson's attention to his little specimen will show that even in an Edward he can see uh, deserts. Now, at first wanted to make sure I was reading desert correctly because it would make sense to me to say here, even in Edward, you can see dessert, meaning you can see, um, you can find a lot of relish over the findings. But then I was thinking, I mean, it is spelled Desert, but of course, this being the 1700s, maybe they spelled dessert that way. Maybe that word dessert didn't even exist back then. I don't, in our sense of it. And then there's just dessert, which I know does not that the etymology of that word does not actually come from dessert as we think of it, like a fudge sundae. So I got tripped up by even in Edward you can see desert, especially since we would think it should be can see a desert or the desert, not just desert without a proper thing ahead of it. So I did a little research and I found another, very little research actually, I just Googled it. I found another copy of Life of Johnson where there's a footnote here and it says that this is kind of a take on a phrase from a satire by Alexander Pope in which he says, even in a bishop, I can spy deserts. And then he mentions Secker is decent, Rundle has a heart. So then I take it, what's really being said here is that Alexander Pope can, even in Edward, see, that there's something vacant or vapid or something peculiar or bad. I'm guessing that's what is being meant to be said here. That he's a very critical sort, Johnson, as we've seen. So I apologize for my confusion from yesterday. But, after about how many, I don't know, 200 or so or more days of reading out loud every day, I'm bound to get tripped up every once in a while and get lost. Anyway, for today, we begin with a very long footnote. Well, not super long, but long enough. To Mr. Perkins, footnote. Mr. Perkins was for a number of years the worthy superintendent of Mr. Thrale's great brewery, and after his death became one of the proprietors of it, and now resides in Mr. Thrale's house in Southwark, which was the scene of so many literary meetings, and in which he continues the liberal hospitality for which it was eminent. Dr. Johnson esteemed him much. He hung up in the counting-house a fine proof of the admirable mezzotinto of Dr. Johnson by Doughty, and when Mrs. Thrale asked him somewhat flippantly, "Why do you put him up in the counting-house?" he answered, "Because, madame, I wish to have one wise man there." "Sir," said Johnson, "I thank you. It is a very handsome compliment, and I believe you speak sincerely." Anyway, this is a letter from Sam Johnson to this Mr. Perkins. "Sir, you may do me a very great favor. Mrs. Williams, a gentlewoman whom you may have seen at Mr. Thrale's, is a petitioner for Mr. Hetherington's charity. Petitions are this day issued at Christ's Hospital. I am a bad manager of business in a crowd, and if I should send a mean man, he may be put away without his errand. I must therefore entreat you that you will go and ask for a petition for Anna Williams, whose paper on inquiries was delivered with answers at the counting-house of the hospital of Thursday the 20th. My servant will attend you thither and bring the petition home, when you have it. The petition which they are to give us is a form which they deliver to every petitioner, and which the petitioner is afterwards to fill up and return to them again. This we must have, or we cannot proceed according to their directions. You need, I believe, only ask for a petition. If you inquire from whom you ask, you can tell them. I beg pardon for giving you this trouble, but it is a matter of great importance. I am, sir, your most humble servant, October 25th, 1774, Sam Johnson. I don't know what that's all about. To James Boswell, Esquire. Dear Sir, there has appeared lately in the papers an account of a boat overset between Mull and Ulva, in which many passengers were lost, and among them MacLeod of Cole. MacLeod of Cole must be a Scotsman. We, you know, were once drowned. Footnote here in the newspapers. So I guess maybe there was a report at some point that Boswell and Johnson drowned in a shipwreck or something. I hope, therefore, that the story is either wantonly or erroneously told. Pray set aside me by the next post. I have printed 240 pages. I am able to do nothing much worth doing to dear Lord Hale's book. I will, however, send back the sheets, and hope, by degrees, to answer all your reasonable expectations. Mr. Thrale has happily surmounted a very violent and acrimonious opposition, but all joys have their abatements. Mrs. Thrale has fallen from her horse, and hurt herself very much. The rest of our friends, I believe, are well. My compliments to Mrs. Boswell. I am, sir, your most affectionate servant, London, October 27, 1774, Sam Johnson. This letter, which shows his tender concern for an amiable young gentleman to whom we had been very much obliged in the Hebrides, I have inserted according to its date, though before receiving it I informed him of the melancholy event that the young Lord of Cole was unfortunately drowned. To James Boswell, Esquire. Dear Sir, last night I corrected the last page of our Journey to the Hebrides. The printer has detained it all this time, for I had, before I went into Wales, written all except 2 sheets. The Patriot was called for by my political friends on Friday, was written on Saturday, and I have heard little of it. So vague are conjectures at a distance. Footnote here. Alluding to a passage in a letter of mine, while speaking of his journey to the Hebrides, I say, but has not the Patriot been an interruption by the time taken to write it, and the time luxuriously spent in listening to its applauses? Back to the letter. As soon as I can, I will take care that copies be sent to you, for I would wish that they might be given before they are bought. But I am afraid that Mr. Strahan will send to you and to the booksellers at the same time. Trade is as diligent as courtesy. I have mentioned all that you recommend. Pray makes my compliments to Mrs. Boswell and the younglings. The club has, I think, not yet met. Tell me, and tell me honestly, what you think and what others say of our travels. Shall we touch the continent? I am, dear sir, your most humble servant, November 26th, 1774, Sam Johnson. There's a footnote here that says, we had projected a voyage together up the Baltic and talked of visiting some of the more northern regions. The Baltic, rather. In his manuscript diary of this year, there is the following of entry. November 27th, Advent Sunday. I considered that this day, being the beginning of the ecclesiastical year, was a proper time for a new course of life. I began to read the great Greek Testaments regularly at 160 verses every Sunday. This day I began the Acts. In this week I read Virgil's Pastorals. I learned to repeat the Pollio and Gallus. I read carelessly the first Georgic. Such evidences of his unceasing ardor, both for divine and human lore, when advanced into his 65th year, and notwithstanding his many disturbances from disease, must make us at once honor his spirit and lament that it should be so grievously clogged by its material tegument. That's a word I don't see very often. Tegument. Tegument. It is remarkable that he was very fond of the precision which calculation produces. Thus, we find in one of his manuscript diaries, quote, 12 pages in 4-2 test, and 30 pages in Bezos folio compromised the whole in 40 days. Unquote. To Dr. Johnson to John Hoole, Esquire. Dear Sir, I have returned your play, Clenios, which you will find underscored with red, where there was a word which I did not like. The red will be washed off with a little water. That's a good one. The red will be washed off with a little water. The plot is so well framed, the intricacy so artful, and the disentanglement so easy, the suspense so affecting, and the passionate parts so properly intersposed, that I have no doubt of its success. I am, Sir, your most humble servant, December 19, 1774, Sam Johnson. And now, friends, we reach 1775, when Johnson was 66. The first effort of his pen in 1775 was proposals for publishing the works of Mrs. Charlotte Lennox in 3 volumes quarto. In his diary, January 2nd, I find this entry, quote, wrote Charlotte's proposals, unquote. But indeed, the interval evidence would have been quite sufficient. Her claim, the internal evidence would have been quite sufficient. Her claim to the favor of the public was thus enforced, quote, most of the pieces, as they appeared singly, have been read with approbation, perhaps above their merit, but of no great advantage to the writer. She hopes, therefore, that she shall not be considered as too indulgent to vanity, or too studious of interest, if, from that labour which has hitherto been chiefly gainful to others, she endeavours to attain at last some profit for herself and her children. She cannot decently enforce her claim by the praise of her own performances, nor can she suppose that, by the most artful and laboured address, any additional notice could be procured to a publication of which Her Majesty had condescended to be the patroness. Unquote. He this year also wrote the preface to Baretti's Easy Lessons in Italian and English. To James Boswell, Esquire. Dear Sir, you never did ask for a book by the post till now, and I did not think of it. You see now it is done. I sent one to the king, and I hear he likes it. I shall send a parcel into Scotland for presents, and intend to give to many of my friends. In your catalogue you left out Lord Auchinleck. I think that's... Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's Boswell's father. Let me know, as fast as you read it, how you like it. And let me know if any mistake is committed, or anything important left out. I wish you could have seen the sheets. My compliments to Mrs. Boswell, and to Veronica, and to all my friends. I am, Sir, your most humble servant, January 14th, 1775, Sam Johnson. Mr. Boswell to Dr. Johnson, Edinburgh, January 19th, 1775. Be pleased to accept of my best thanks for your journey to the Hebrides, which came to me by last night's post. I did really ask the favor twice, but you have been even with me by granting it so speedily. Vis dat qui cito dat. He gives twice who gives quickly. Though ill of a bad cold, you kept me up the greatest part of the last night, for I did not stop till I had read every word of your book. I looked back to our first talking of a visit to the Hebrides, which was many years ago, when sitting by ourselves in the Mitre Tavern in London. I think about witching time o' night, and then exulted in contemplating our shame-fulfilled and a momentum perenne, an enduring monument of it erected by your superior abilities. I shall only say that your book has afforded me a high gratification. I shall afterwards give you my thoughts on particular passages. In the meantime, I hasten to tell you of your having mistaken 2 names which you will correct in London, as I shall do here, that the gentleman who deserves the valuable compliments which you have paid them may enjoy their honours. In page 106 for Gordon Reed Murchison, and in page 357 for Maclean Reed MacLeod. But I am now to apply to you for immediate aid in my profession, which you have never refused to grant when I requested it. I enclose you a petition for Dr. Meems, a physician at Aberdeen, in which Sir John Dalrymple has exerted his talents, and which I am to answer as counsel for the managers of the Royal Infirmary in that city. Mr. Jopp, the provost who delivered to you your freedom, is one of my clients, and as a citizen of Aberdeen, you will support him. Well, that's something I've got to look up. What does this mean? Mr. Jopp, the provost who delivered to you your freedom. Something I feel like I've skipped over. The fact is shortly this. In a translation of the charter, of the infirmary for Latin into English, made under the authority of the managers, the same phrase in the original is in one place rendered physician, but when applied to Dr. Mims is rendered doctor of medicine. Dr. Mims complained of this before the translation was printed, but was not indulged with having it altered. And he has brought an action for damages on account of a supposed injury, as if the designation given to him were an inferior one, tending to make it be supposed he is not a physician, and consequently to hurt his practice. That's funny, huh? My father has dismissed the action as groundless, and now he has appealed to the whole court. Footnote here. In the Court of Session of Scotland, an action is first tried by one of the judges, who is called the Lord Ordinary, and if either party is dissatisfied, he may appeal to the whole court, consisting of 15, the Lord President, and 14 other judges, who have both in and out of court the title of lords, from the name of their estates, as Lord Unclerk, Lord Mondabo, or Monbado, etc. To James Boswell, Esquire. Dear Sir, I long to hear how you like the book. It is, I think, much liked here. But Macpherson is very furious. Can you give me any more intelligence about him? Or his Fingal? Do what you can, and do it quickly. Is Lord Hales on our side? Pray let me know what I owed you when I left you, that I may send it to you. I am going to write about the Americans. Uh-oh. If you have picked up any hints among your lawyers who are great masters of the laws of nations, or if your own mind suggests anything, let me know. But mum, it is a secret. I will send you a parcel of books as soon as I can, but I cannot do as I wish. However, you find everything mentioned in the book which you recommended. Langton is here. We are all that we are. We are all that ever we were. He is a worthy fellow, without malice, though not without resentment. I think the same could be said of me. Poor Beauclerk is so ill that his life is thought to be in danger. Lady Di, nurses him with very great assiduity. Reynolds has taken too much to strong liquor, and seems to delight in his new character. Footnote here. It should be recollected that this fanciful description of his friend was given by Johnson after he himself had become a water drinker. This is all the news that I have, but as your love verses, I will send you a few which I made upon Inkeneth. Footnote here. See them in Journal of the Tour of the Hebrides, 3rd edition. But remember the condition that you shall not show them except to Lord Hales, whom I love better than any man, whom I know so little. If he asks you to transcribe them for me, you may do it, but I think he must promise not to let them be copied again, nor to show them as mine. I have at last sent back Lord Hale's sheets. I never think about returning them, because I alter nothing. You will see that I might as well have kept them. However, I am ashamed of my delay. and if I have the honor of receiving any more, promise punctuality to return them by the next post. Make my compliments to to dear Mrs. Boswell, and to Miss Veronica. I am, dear sir, yours most faithfully, January 21st, 1775, Sam Johnson. There's a footnote here that says, he now sent me a Latin inscription for my historical picture of Mary, Queen of Scots, and afterwards favored me with an English translation. Mr. Alderman Boydell, that eminent patron of the arts, has subjoined them to the engraving from my picture. And there's something in Latin here, and the translation. And I'm just going to go, what the hell, I'm going to read in Latin, even though I can't read Latin. Maria scrotum regina, hominum sedesorum, contupellus lasata, minis terita, clamoribus victa, labello per quiem regno sedit, lacrimans trepidasque nomen appondit. And that, of course, translates as, Mary, Queen of Scots, harassed, terrified, and overpowered by the insults, menaces, and clamors of her rebellious subjects, sets her hand, with tears and confusion, to a resignation of the kingdom. All right. Well, I always like the parts where it becomes like an episode of Ironsides, where Boswell has some like law case and he needs what's his name? That Milton Berle, Raymond Burr, in the form of Sam Johnson to help him out. Those are good. Anyway, till next time, bye from Boswell.